I measure success on two fronts. One is on a personal front. It's really a question of, have I improved people's lives, like someone's lives? It doesn't have to be millions of people, just people through various interactions that I have, or whether it's through my talks, workshops, individual interactions, a smile at a coffee shop. Have I made someone's life slightly better than it would have been if I hadn't existed?
Welcome to Future Fit Leadership, a podcast for emerging, experienced and executive leaders to build community, grow capability and future focus their career pathways. There has been a global shift in how we lead, and our conversations with leaders and executives explores the skills, strategies and mindsets that is needed to thrive in this ever-evolving landscape of the future. So whether you are a seasoned executive, an aspiring leader, or simply curious about the future of leadership, we are here to give you practical insights to unlock your potential, change the status quo, and break open our assumptions on how work works. Produced in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives, Future Fit Leadership is your place for bite-sized learning for executives hungry to make a change.
Hello and welcome to Future Fit Leadership. I hope wherever you are listening to this podcast, you are well. For decades, leadership has been built around targets. Hit the number, deliver the quarter, show progress on a dashboard, red, amber, green, simple, clear, easy to report. But what if those numbers are only telling part of the story? In this episode, I sit down with Radhika Dutt to unpack a challenge many leaders are dealing with right now, even if they don't always say it out loud. We are measuring performance, but are we always understanding progress? Radhika shares a powerful example from her time in business that consistently hit its sales targets while quietly losing ground in the market. On paper, they look strong. In reality, the strategy was starting to weaken. And that's where the gap matters, because when teams are focused on hitting metrics, they can miss what is actually changing underneath. We stop asking the questions, assumptions go untested, and over time, performance becomes something we just report on, not something we truly understand. What Radhika offers is a different way to think about it. Instead of asking teams to chase numbers, she challenges leaders to define the problem that they are trying to solve. What is really happening in the business? What do we not yet understand? How do we create space for teams to test, learn, and adjust in real time? She introduces a framework called OLA: observe, hypothesize, learn, adapt. It shifts the focus from reporting outcomes to working through problems with intent and clarity. And when teams work this way, something changes. The pressure to perform is replaced with the responsibility to think. The conversation moves from, did we hit the target, to, what are we seeing and what do we do next? If you've ever looked at the set of results and don't feel they quite reflect what is really going on, then this conversation will land for you. Because it's not just about the metrics. It is about how we lead, how we make decisions, and how we build businesses that can respond when the numbers alone are not enough. Please enjoy this conversation with Radhika Dutt.
Hello Radhika, welcome to Future Fit Leadership, all the way from freezing Boston, and I'm in warm Melbourne. How are you today?
I'm great. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me, Sadhna.
Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation because I think some of the things you talk about in how leaders need to change their mindset and how they manage people and their businesses, I'm super interested in. But I want to talk a little bit about you first. You've lived and worked across many places, and you speak 9 languages. Talk to me about how you landed up in so many different countries, and that's an amazing skill set to speak 9 different languages.
Funny enough, to me, languages come easily, and so I've always sort of discounted that. But I will say that I love being able to go somewhere, and it leaves people guessing, sort of, where are you from? And it's such a wonderful feeling to be in Italy, and then you experience Italy in a very different way when you speak
Mm.
Italian, like it's your mother tongue, and then they can't quite place your accent. They think, oh, I don't know where you're from exactly, but somewhere in Italy. So that gives me a lot of satisfaction. To me, language is a way of getting to know people and cultures. It's a portal to people. So that's why I guess there's that interest. I guess in terms of where I lived in India and then moved to South Africa when I was 12. Those were momentous times. I was in South Africa from 91 until 95, which is right after the apartheid laws were abolished and right after the first democratic elections. And then I came to the US for undergrad. So I've been a little bit everywhere. I lived in Singapore for a couple of years. So I guess I just enjoy being in different places.
Which place has shaped you the most?
Hmm. I think each place leaves this indelible mark, right? For me, South Africa is probably the one that shaped me the most. And I think it's only in my 40s now that I'm unpacking some of the ways that it's shaped me. On the one hand, if you can imagine as an adolescent living in apartheid South Africa or just after, right, being the second non-white in my class, sorry, the second in my school, the first in the whole class. So it was just really momentous times. So the way it has shaped me is it created this drive in me, this drive to constantly achieve and do better, etc. But then unpacking some of that, you also realize that some of that drive comes from a toxic place. So being able to sort of let that go and say, what I want to do I want to do it because I have something to prove? Or am I doing it because this drives me and it's my own passion? So that's some of the unpacking I've been doing. But yes, South Africa left an indelible mark.
Now, you've also been a female co-founder of businesses. Talk to me about that.
I have. That has been an experience that shaped me too. So, my first startup was right after, actually, while I was still at MIT in our dorm rooms, it was myself and four other co founders. One of the co founders is actually now my husband. And they say for better or for worse, but not for lunch. It turned out we worked really well together.
Even over lunch.
Yeah, so that was really interesting as an experience, being the only female co-founder among us five. What I observed was that not my husband, but the other three co-founders had so much hubris and arrogance. And I see this a lot in entrepreneurs, right? This belief that they just know, this confidence that is not founded on anything. And I remember questioning myself a lot at that time. There were a lot of things that we were doing and that I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't seem the right way. But fine, you guys seem like you know what you're doing. You sound so confident about it. I would go with it. And it was only in retrospect that it really that I learned this lesson and it stayed with me for life. The idea that if it doesn't sit well by me, I do question it. And, I've learned to really trust my gut and instincts that if I cannot find a logical enough explanation why something should be the right way to do it, I don't go with it. And that was really a wonderful learning experience.
Do you think a lot of female founders question themselves and have that confidence, the imposter syndrome that they have to work through?
See, I'm going to answer this in a more nuanced way. One thing I will say is very often female founders are given this advice that, oh, you're not asking for what you want, or that you're not being assertive about things. And I feel like very often, it's often said to female founders to make them feel like the fact that you haven't gotten funding is your fault, like you just haven't asked for enough, etc. So I never like to take that angle because it's not, it's never that I didn't ask for what I wanted, etc. And so I want to move away from that positioning. What I will say is this experience at MIT that I saw over and over, that as a woman, your confidence, or well, let's just say not your, but like most women, when I've seen them confident that they really understand the material, it's a level of understanding where they're able to really explain it themselves, right? Whereas a guy's confidence in that same engineering material, they were like, oh, I know this really well. And it's like, surface level knowledge in comparison. And this is what I've heard from many professors too, that women often think that they don't understand something well, whereas, a man might have confidence in it without really understanding it. I think that is something that I do notice. And but you know what? Honestly, like there isn't something I would change about that. There's something very authentic about just embracing sort of the depth that you want. Um, and it's made me learn that for me to be able to create change, I I am able to create change by also being more thoughtful about questioning myself. That, I'm very transparent with my team, that I don't feel like I have all the answers, but my team trusts me that much more. I say that now with confidence that I don't have the answers. This is very different from the confidence of making it seem like I have all the answers and then not having that and turning out to be wrong.
Mm, mm. At what point in this career journey did you start to suspect that the traditional goal setting or business goal setting or personal goal setting we do is causing more harm than good?
What I observed for a long time in my career was that goals had a side effect. But it took me a while to articulate that goals don't work well. And more importantly, what do you do if goal setting is not the right way? That last question is the hardest to answer. So I'll share with you sort of how my thinking evolved on this. Really early in my career, I worked at a company called Avid. And for some people who might have heard the name, we owned the video editing market. So basically, every movie ever made in Hollywood back at the time was edited with Avid's video editors. Every Oscar-winning movie, had been edited on Avid. We dominated the market. And if you looked at our sales numbers, you would have thought everything is going swimmingly well, right? And our numbers were always moving up and to the right. But if you just unpack those numbers a little bit and asked bigger questions, what you would have noticed is our low end was getting eroded by Apple and Adobe, our mid-tier too, and the way we were hitting our sales targets was by going further and further into the high end. The realization for me, right, was that we were making our sales numbers and therefore it made it seem like the business was doing well.
Well,
And the reality was, this is what happens with targets, that it gives everyone the incentive to say, ta-da, look, I'm such a high performer. I hit my numbers. And it makes you not look at the bad numbers as much. It makes you sort of just skip over the bad numbers. And this is what we see in so many businesses, right? Where complacency sets in. This is why the legendary Andy Grove at Intel said, leaders are the last to know. It's because everyone wants to show you what you want to hear. And so this is what was happening at Avid. What we needed to do was to look at our low end and say, okay, so Apple and Adobe are eroding that. How does their business model work? Why can't we seem to compete? Well, it turns out Apple is happy to give away the software, and what they want to sell is the hardware. Adobe has a suite of products. They're happy to give away one element of that suite, right? Whereas our business model in the video editing business was different. We were selling those video editors. Could we even compete in the low end? Should we have tried to compete in the low end or give it up to them? Where should we have placed our bets and how should we have fortified our market? The mid-tier was attractive. How should we have fortified that? And should we have kept investing in the high end? Was that worth it? Like, what should our strategy have been? Like, these were the questions that we weren't really thinking about. We weren't thinking about the puzzle to be solved. We were focusing on the numbers. And this is the final step of that evolution. Over time, what I realized was when we are chasing numbers and targets, what we miss out is that in the focus to show progress, we stop making progress. And that's where the mindset needs to shift from achieving goals to solving puzzles.
I like that. So let's talk about what you are calling OHLAs and OKRs. Now, they're acronyms, but I'm going to get you to explain the acronyms and the difference between the two.
Okay, so OKRs are objectives and key results. This is what, Google has said has been the secret to success. And John Doerr, the famous billionaire VC, wrote about it in Measure What Matters, that this is how great companies achieve great things. They rock the world, apparently. I'm going to debunk all of that. OKRs don't really work well. It's just another way of doing goal setting. It's just new labels, repackaging of same old, same old. Goal setting has been the way we've done things since Peter Drucker introduced management by objectives in the 1940s. It's really been that long, right? 75 years. And we're still using that mindset of goal setting, and it doesn't work. And we can talk about why. And OHLAs is what I call, it rolls off the tongue when you say OLA. So OLA is what I call this framework for puzzle setting, puzzle solving. And the OHLA stands for observe, hypothesize, learn, adapt. And it makes so much intuitive sense when you think about a puzzle. Just think about a Rubik's Cube. You first observe how the pieces move, then you hypothesize what you should do, you try it, you learn from it, and you adapt. And this is what OLA is all about, this puzzle setting mindset.
I've just done a little bit of research on it before I had the conversation with you. And when you explain it in that way, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? Because it's almost like asking the question. So we're going to set a goal setting. In my mind, this was the difference when I read about it. We want 100 customers this year to buy this particular product off the shelf or come into our business as clients, versus the question, if we launch this product or this service model, will our customers love it? Because unless they love it, they're not going to come and buy the product or be our customer, right? So instead of actually, is that how you see it as well? Or am I on the wrong track here?
No, I completely agree. The puzzle might not necessarily be whether people love it. The puzzle might be how will we grow the business, right? And what will make 100 customers buy this in a way that we have a sustainable business? That might be the puzzle. But I think to your point, the key to this is defining the right puzzle so that your team is aligned on what is the puzzle you're solving exactly. It's not just some metric that you're chasing. And I love the example of the dating industry, and I can talk about that in a moment. But chasing metrics doesn't necessarily solve a puzzle. And solving the puzzle can give you better business results, which is what I've found in my own experience, that working with companies in my consulting work, we have achieved much better business results by solving puzzles as opposed to chasing goals.
So to give me the example of the dating business, you can't say that and not give us the example now.
The teaser.
Yeah.
So, dating has been all about optimizing metrics. So if you look at dating apps, they've been optimizing metrics, and user engagement is one of the key metrics. And one would say, that is a really important metric. So why wouldn't you optimize for that? A lot of companies have goals for user engagement, increase it by X%. And so what happened in dating industry? Tinder launched in 2013, and they launched with swipe left, swipe right. User engagement was through the roof. And everyone else said, oh, great. We love this idea. We're going to do this too. So everyone copied swipe left and swipe right. But here's what happened. In the short term, great. User engagement was through the roof for everyone. But what it was doing was the more intimacy was gamified, the more it created a toxic dating environment where people were feeling dating fatigue, FOMO. They were just feeling burnt out from dating. So people started deleting dating apps. The entire industry was in a slump. And in fact, last year, Bumble laid off 30% of all of its staff. So the point of this, right, is we often want to set goals and targets because we say, oh, this is the measure of success. The reality is instead of just pursuing such metrics and incentivizing teams that this is what we want to chase, we should have set, or the dating industry should have really set, what is the puzzle? And the puzzle should have been, how do we improve the dating experience while monetizing our apps, right? That was the key to it. And if that is the puzzle you're solving for, then you monitor things like, how are people feeling? What is the sentiment of our users? And are people feeling burnout from, like, by the time you get to this level of burnout and a toxic dating environment, you're too far down the line. Like, you've destroyed dating.
In a complex, fast-changing world that we live in today, and leaders are managing a whole range of fast-moving, complex situations in their businesses, how do we manage people against a hypothesis or assumptions in this model?
And I love this question, right? Because people automatically feel like, well, if I don't set goals, where's the accountability? How do I know? Have you done your job or not? Like, just this. The simplicity or the perceived simplicity of targets is it gives me a very binary answer. You either have or haven't achieved your targets. But herein lies the problem, right? If you look at business results, it's not about a binary answer of have you or haven't you. Accountability comes not from this sort of gaming of this binary information, and which is what happens in every single monthly business review where you have to show OKRs, red, yellow, or green. People find ways to make it look green. What you want instead is to hold people accountable by how well are they solving the puzzle. And so about this, what you really want is transparency in terms of how are people solving the puzzle? What's going on? You want to know the truth from the trenches. So how do you do that? And so this is where, in terms of Ola, I'll talk in a moment about how you set the puzzle. But, and I'm sort of doing this backwards. Before I talk about how to set the puzzle, let me talk about how to solve the puzzle, because this is the key in terms of accountability. When you solve the puzzle, you share answers to 3 questions. For each attempt, as you try an attempt, you say, how well did that attempt work? How well did it work? And that's inviting both the good and the bad. Then you ask the second question, what did I learn from that? And this is where I say to teams, don't just spit out numbers at me. I don't just want to hear user engagement, daily active users. Don't just spit out such numbers. Tell me the narrative in addition to the numbers. What is the story? What is actually happening? And then the third question, which is based on how well it worked and what you learned, what will you try next? Right? And so accountability comes from honest answers to these 3 things. When I'm a manager and I sit with my team, in these individual meetings and people share with me, here's how well it worked. What have I learned? What will I do next? I get a clear picture of exactly how deeply you're thinking. When you tell me answers to what have I learned, and you might share numbers and what you think is going on, I can ask just 1 or 2 questions. Like, the other day, one of my team members, they told me, okay, 48% of people are landing on this page and therefore this is working. And I was like, yes, but are they landing on this page because this is the landing page? Or is it because, or is this because they came there from somewhere else? And they were like, oh, I don't know. Well, see, this is where I can push my team that I need you to look deeper into these things, right? I know exactly how in-depth your analysis has been when I can ask a couple of these questions. This is what brings accountability, not just people sharing numbers that I want to see and the OKR is green, but being able to understand the depth of how well did it work? What's the narrative you got from this? And meaning, what have you learned and what will you do next?
So how do you set the puzzle? Because it's, it'd be very different to how we set goals at the moment.
Mm. And I think there's a convergence there in terms of how one sets goals today and what you can do instead. So when I talk about setting a puzzle, to me, a puzzle is set with 3 O's. The 3 O's are the following. The first is the observation. So here's an example from sales, right? So the observation might be, we grew in the last 3 years, but in this last year, we've stalled. And so that's the first O, that sales have stalled after 3 years. The second O is the open questions. We have an observation. The open questions are the questions we genuinely don't know answers to. So why have sales stalled? Is it that something is happening with AI And it's something that's an unexpected effect that we didn't think would affect our market. Or maybe it's that we were selling to the early adopter and the mass market has very different needs. The messages even that we are putting out there aren't resonating. There might be other such open questions that you genuinely don't know answers to. So put them out there. And then the third question, this is the objective. Sorry, not the question, the third O, that's the objective. And that's the summary of the puzzle. So the objective in this case is, how do we get back to that growth trajectory by solving this puzzle? And so when you set goals, right, or when you set OKRs, that objective under OKRs is often something very arbitrary. I hear things like, grow the business, and then the key result is achieve target of X million by the end of this year. And instead, you can have an objective that is a summary of the puzzle that you just said. Instead of just saying grow the business, I set the puzzle for my team saying, we want to get back to this growth trajectory and X million in sales, but here's the puzzle, and this is what I want us to solve, right? So this is how the two can converge in terms of both goal setting, but do it in this way that is puzzle setting. So don't set targets, but set puzzles, and then see how people are solving this puzzle.
How do you manage people to the puzzle then?
In the sales example, I might set the puzzle and I might also say, we want to get to a target of X million. But I don't just say this is the target. I actually describe both the observation, the open questions, so that when people tell me the answers to those three questions, which is, how well has it worked? What have I learned? What will I try next? Here's how that will come across, right? In the sales example, they might go test out new messaging. That might be the hypothesis that our messaging was working for early adopters. It's not working for decision makers. They might come back to me and tell me, okay, so here's how well this messaging is working. Yay, now we're finally getting these meetings with decision makers. Okay, great. So you're getting those meetings, and they might tell me, but we're not closing those deals yet. So what have you learned? And the answer might be, okay, that the decision maker is attracted to our message, but turns out there's another group that we've never been talking to traditionally, but in the mass market, this is the group that still needs buy-in. Okay, so that's what you've learned in terms of what you're going to do next. Now we're going to try maybe something new to be able to invite this new group that we've never been talking to traditionally. Maybe it's webinars we'll do for them to reach out to them directly. Maybe we'll create material to see if our decision maker can forward it to them, and if that attracts that group and gets them on our side. So now I have a new solution, the next attempt at the puzzle. And in the next cycle, I want my team to tell me, how well did that work? What have you learned? What will you do next? This is how we keep doing this accountability. Every time you solve one layer of this Rubik's Cube, the next layer comes along and then you can solve that.
Tell me, can you run OLAs and OKRs in parallel with each other in a business?
That's such an interesting question. And the answer to that is yes, but with a word of caution. So what I'll say in my own experience that has not worked is my going to a leader and saying, let's drop OKRs, let's do puzzle setting instead. And the reason it's not worked is because there's a fear in leaders, and the fear, which I completely understand, this is not judgment, I understand this fear that OKRs are the devil we know. And so when I come along and say, drop OKRs and do puzzle setting, the fear is, one, how do I know that my team knows how to do puzzles, just solve puzzles? What if, I let go of OKRs and my team isn't yet accomplished in solving puzzles? Then I've lost control. That is a big fear. And so what I found to work well is I don't tell leaders to drop OKRs, but I tell them, here's the downside of OKRs, that you're just hearing information that you want to hear, that people are showing you the good news. What you want is the good and the bad. And then I tell them that, look, I'm going to work with a team so that we present all of this information to you. Your role is to role model for them that it is okay to share the good and the bad, that you want to indulge in this discussion in a very constructive way, that we're going to create psychological safety, because this is not traditional in an OKR driven environment to speak this openly about what's not working. And so once I've done this prep with leaders, I then work with the team at a ground level where I start introducing this puzzle setting and puzzle solving way. And what I find is the muscle for puzzle solving in an OKR driven environment has typically atrophied a bit. And so it takes, 1 or 2 sessions for me to be able to get teams back into this mode of excitement about puzzles, right? And where they start sharing this openly with me in terms of, okay, here's a feature I released last month. Here's what I'm finding. Here's how well it worked or didn't work, what I've learned, what will I do next? The first couple of times, teams are very tempted to just share the spit out of all sorts of data and stats. And I have to pull them back and say, okay, but what's the story? What have you figured out? Tell me the story. But after this couple of tries, then I bring leaders and teams together. And I found that to work really well.
Have you, when you've spoken to leaders first about this shift, because it's a big shift in how we think about managing people and business and growth and revenue and profit, what's been their reaction? Have they sort of gone, Radhika, you're on a different planet, like I'm not going to change, or, have they been cynical about it?
I come at it from an angle of empathy, understanding sort of why there's all this fear. And the biggest fear
Mm.
is losing control. And what I have found is, anyone saying that something works better than goal setting, it's really hard to swallow that pill, because this whole goal setting approach, it has existed since Peter Drucker's
Mm.
1940s, right? um, and OKRs are basically the same management by objectives, which was taken by Andy Grove at Intel in late 70s, and he created OKRs. And then, John Doerr in 2018 evangelized OKRs. So basically, there's nothing fundamentally different about OKRs. So if we just think about how entrenched goal setting is in the corporate psyche for 75 years, to come in and say, stop doing that and do puzzle setting instead, I totally see how it's very hard for someone to let go of that instantly. And so it's not that people tell me to my face, you're on a different planet. It's more that I just don't understand how I'm going to do this. And therefore, the simple and step-by-step answer to this is, I'm not asking anyone to drop OKRs on day one. But what I have found with thoughtful leaders is that they themselves admit the reason OKRs work for us is because, well, we don't emphasize goals or targets that much. That, if teams don't meet those OKRs, actually we sort of, it's more like a guideline. We don't sort of push for those numbers. Like it's this very sort of soft. We don't really play by numbers. We mostly are more vision driven. That's what I find. Leaders say, who find that OKRs are not terribly harmful for them. So especially for those leaders who find that they're anyway de-emphasizing OKRs and work with them in a very different way from what was originally prescribed, they will find that puzzles is sort of the natural inclination.
With the businesses that you've worked with, what's the impact been on the team as they've shifted from just looking at OKRs to bringing OLA into it as well?
Oh my gosh, this is the most satisfying piece of the whole thing. So I will tell you this example of a Greek company I've been working with over the last 3 years. And I also was just speaking with a leader at Adidas who told me about how this impacted her team. So I'll start with my own experience and I'll share this other leader's experience too. When I started working as a consultant, the team had been using OKRs. And really, like, there was the sense of burnout and also just teams feeling both anxious about goals, but also feeling not as motivated. And, once I came in and we started thinking about this and this puzzle mindset, I cannot tell you just how different the feel of the whole team is. Like the level of motivation that the team has, doing something not because anyone else is driving you to do this, but because you see the puzzle, you're driven to solve this puzzle. It is an internal drive that completely takes over. And imagine this, right? It's a group of really smart people. These are all mathematicians and data analysts. They are just brilliant people to work with. And yet, because they were driven by external goals when I came along, and here are the numbers you have to hit, there just wasn't as much, internal drive. And shifting it to solving puzzles, you know, the smarter the people are, the more high performing, even if you don't see the people being high performers because of whatever is happening in your company culture, when you have smart people who are capable, the moment you shift to this puzzle solving approach, it's like catnip for a team. It just levels up a team. The level of energy, passion, drive is very different. And now it's created this team bonding too, which is this part that another leader at Adidas also explained. She was saying how they started doing this in her team, and it was a really toxic environment where she started because it was an organization where they had just had layoffs. The headquarters had said, your team has to show results and prove that it's worth keeping this product. You can imagine what sort of pressure that is if the
Mm.
team had just, been through layoffs. Morale is as down as it gets, right? And they started using this puzzle setting and puzzle solving approach. And by the end, not only were they seeing fantastic business results, they proved that the product was great and worth keeping. In the end, headquarters chose to keep the product, but not the team. But the team was so strong and there was such a strong bond that those people, they're still in touch years later. Not only that, but a lot of them like got together and said, we want to go as a team. We want to be hired by a company. Like the level of team bonding it created was just completely different from,
Mm.
the competition sort of lack of collaboration feeling when you have OKRs.
Mm. Under the OLA model, if someone's listening to this, are there some key questions they can ask under each one of those? So, observe, hypothesis, learning, and adapt. Are there key questions they can ask under those?
Yeah. So, the way the four letters, the way they match this puzzle setting and puzzle solving, when you define the three O's of defining the puzzle, so the observation, the open questions, and objective, that's setting the puzzle. And once you set the puzzle, you sort of really have to observe before you start to solve the puzzle. This is the point where, like a Rubik's Cube, you first have to look and observe. Um, just how the pieces
Mm.
move before you make an attempt. So
Mm.
that's where the observation comes in. So observe first. And then the hypothesize, learn, adapt. Those three letters are the three questions of puzzle solving, which is when you're ready to make an attempt. And then hypothesize is where you ask this question. So, how well did this work? Your hypothesis, how well did it work? The learning is where you ask that question, what did I learn? And the adaptation is where you ask, what will I try next? So, that's how those four letters go together. And by the way, just uh, the OHLA and the way it all comes together and how it's different from what we do today is if you look at lean startup and the acronyms for that, or rather the words that go with lean startup, it's build, test, learn, scale.
Mm.
Notice that the first word is build, right? This is the temptation we have in the corporate world. The desire is to jump into the solution. Let's just try things, see what sticks, then we iterate. Let's build, then we test, learn, scale. Whereas the puzzle setting part requires a slightly different mindset. You have to be willing to stay with the discomfort of not fully understanding, and therefore you have to observe first. When I say define the puzzle, you define the puzzle, but you have to look at it first to see what is actually happening. That observation part is so important. And I can talk about the importance of staying with the discomfort if you like.
Yeah, that'll be great. Please do.
So I'll give you an example. What happens today is that we're so data driven, right?
Mm.
We want to jump to the solution, and that solution is typically defined by, well, we have data, just go look it up and tell me what we need to do. And even when I joined this Greek company on a consulting basis, right? When I first started, the first instinct was, well, we need to improve our user engagement. Let's look at data. What is it telling us? Our users are all complaining about the same thing. There was one feature they all complained about, which is our filtering for lists is very hard. These filters, they're terrible. Everyone hates them. Let's change it. Let's make filtering better. And even there, by the way, there were people saying, please don't rethink all of filtering, make small changes so that we can deliver quick improvements, right? This is the kind of build, test, learn, scale mindset that we see. Look at the data, just go change things. And I had to say, well, but let's hold off for a minute before we jump and improve filtering. Let's observe first. I don't know the answer to this. Is filtering the main reason people are not using our product? Let's go observe what is happening. And the observation was only tech savvy brokers were using our product. And so clearly, all the feedback coming in was from those people who already were using the product. But it wasn't answering for me. If it's those people who are using the product, who isn't using the product and what do they want? I don't have data on that. You don't have data on the unknown unknowns. And often the unknown unknowns are the biggest opportunities that you have not figured out. So don't just jump in with a solution just because data is telling you something. Data might be indicating exactly the right thing, but stop first, observe, make sure you understand the puzzle well enough, whether the data is telling you the known knowns or the unknown, whether it can point to the unknown unknowns, right?
Now, Radhika, you are writing a book about this, but you've also written another book called Radical Product Thinking. Tell us a little bit about that book.
So, Radical Product Thinking was the book that I wrote, published in 2021. And what it's about is a way to systematically build world changing products while avoiding what I call product diseases. So, you remember I told you about the first startup that I was a co founder of. I'll give you an example of a product disease that we had caught. It was what I would now call hero syndrome. I talk about this in the book, but hero syndrome was basically that we were all about going big, scale, but we hadn't really articulated what is the problem we were setting out to solve. Our vision was revolutionizing wireless. And I don't even know 25 years later what we meant by revolutionizing wireless, right? And so radical product thinking is about a lot of these product diseases that are so common. Hero syndrome is just one of them. I'll mention a few others. Pivotitis is another one. Obsessive sales disorder, strategic swelling. These are diseases that are so common. And so radical product thinking is about how you can build great products very systematically while avoiding those diseases that kill products.
Now, we've come to a point in our podcast, what we call the Spotlight Shuffle. I have 20 questions in front of me. They're very, very random. You get to pick a number, and I'll ask you the question against that number.
Number 8.
Number 8. Okay. Number 8 is, what's one mistake that taught you more than any success ever could or has?
I think the biggest one was what I mentioned earlier, which was not trusting my gut about feeling like this doesn't sit right by me. And I've learned that now I don't do that. But that was probably the biggest one that I've learned from.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I'm a big believer that your gut's usually always right, and we tend to sometimes put that voice in the back of our head in a box as opposed to actually digging in and questioning, why am I feeling this way? What's the reason behind it?
Yeah, it's so true. But there is a caveat to that, right? The counter to that is sometimes I see entrepreneurs who have so much hubris and arrogance where they feel like, well, actually. Elon Musk's example at Tesla is a great one, right? Where the arrogance was, yeah, Toyota has had all of these manufacturing processes for decades and decades, but we can do manufacturing better. And let's just throw out all of their processes and start over. Like one of the key issues that they ran into was quality issues and manufacturing slowdowns because of that, right?
Mm.
So, but they did a good job in being able to question uh, and rethink some elements. Like they were the ones who came up with an electric motor for the car that uses the Hall effect, which none of the other electric car manufacturers have used. Like they were the only ones to use that and got better performance. So I think the key there is knowing when to trust your gut and to feel like I'm not going to just go along with something that others are going along with, but when not to have that hubris and to question that you may be wrong. And I think that is what comes, I guess, only with experience, right?
Mm. Mm. Very true. All right, next number.
Number two.
Number two. Okay, what's one future shift you think leaders aren't prepared for but really should be?
Oh, this one. So I think with AI, a lot of people, what they are prepared for is, oh, let's use AI, we get productivity gains instantly. And the assumption is that, we're going to need fewer people being able to produce more with AI. What I worry about a lot is that what AI is going to generate is a huge amount of what I call product slop. So what is
Mm.
product slop? It is, very similar to AI content slop that we're so familiar with, the kind of crappy content that you can read and oh yeah, this was written by AI. But similar to that, it's product slop where we create really bad user interfaces, bad UX, just very half-assed code that we very quickly throw out there, Frankensteins of products that optimize for various short-term metrics, but we don't think about the long term. And the reason I worry about this sort of mediocrity that we throw in there, like people think, well, people will vote with their dollar. I don't feel like that is 100% true because if everyone is throwing out AI slop, it's really hard to wade through that. It's hard to vote with your dollar for, something that's marginally better, right? So
Mm.
this is what I
Mm.
worry about. And the one proof point for this that shows me that this is a trend that I'm right to worry about is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola in 2024 in for the holiday season, they created ads that were generated by AI, and they got a huge just pushback from customers for the crap that they created in ads. In 2025, what did they do? They just did that again. They again used AI. And why? Their CMO said, oh, because we can create it. It takes us just 1 month as opposed to 1 year. So they insisted on creating more such AI slop, right? This is what worries me. If Coca-Cola can do it,
Anyone
everyone else
can.
can say, well, I don't care. You just have to put up with it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good point, actually. And there is a lot of AI slop out there. You just got to scroll through Instagram on a daily basis. Okay, next number.
Number 20.
Oh, last one. How do you measure your impact as a leader beyond performance metrics?
Oh, and I feel like this is so relevant for the topic that we talked
We
about
talked
today.
about, yeah.
um, so when I wrote Radical Product Thinking, my main metric for success was, have I created change in the world? If I've inspired even a few people to create better products that are both, better products, but also people are more thoughtful about being responsible about what they put in the world, then that is success. And to me, I measure success on two fronts. One is on a personal front. It's really a question of, have I improved people's lives, like someone's lives? It doesn't have to be millions of people, just people through various interactions that I have, or whether it's through my talks, workshops, individual interactions, a smile at a workshop, at a coffee shop. Have I made someone's life slightly better than it would have been if I hadn't existed? I
Mm.
think that to me is personal success. And the professional part of it is, have I changed something to or inspired someone to do better than they would have if they hadn't come across my work?
It's a legacy piece, isn't it, really?
So true. I would so love to know the answer for you.
How would I measure impact as a leader beyond my performance metrics? I think for me, the first of all, is what is the impact that I have left on a business? And will the impact that I left in the business survive me in the business? Because I think that's a really true measure of how you've led an organization.
Yeah.
And that's the legacy piece, right? So even when I'm not there, the changes that I made and the direction that I led the business in still exists after I've gone. Now, it may not exist in exactly the same way when I was there, because of course that's how you lead an organization. But there are elements of it that still exist, either in the culture, in the performance, in measurement, in, how people think about the business, how people work in the business. I think that's a great measure. And that's kind of what I look for in every organization I work in. What can I do that will survive me?
That's beautiful. And I love it. I call it the Radhika effect. Like working with this Greek company, they say every time you come here, we feel this Radhika effect. And, and just what you described as well, it's kind of like the sadhana effect, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we look to leave behind, right?
It is. And it's a great way to end the podcast. Thank you so much for your time, all the way from Boston, as I said earlier. So, your first book, Radical Product Thinking, I'm assuming people can buy that online anywhere.
Yes, it's on Amazon and in bookstores, wherever you want.
Great. And if people want to connect with you and find out more about the difference between OKRs and OLAs, because we've sparked an interest, the best way to connect with you is through LinkedIn or your website.
Yes, and I'm very reachable on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from our listeners. And you can download the Ola toolkit. I'll share a link to that.
Great.
And it's very easy to use because it's in Google Slides format so that you can start thinking about your puzzles that you're working on and how you're solving them with those 3 questions. So you can download the Ola toolkit and tell me all about your experience by reaching out to me on LinkedIn, because I'm working on my second book and I'd love to hear your story.
Amazing. Radhika, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Sadhana.
If you like what you've heard, please share, rate, and review this podcast. And don't forget to share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. The producer of Future Fit Leadership is Maritza Barone from Guide Your Light Network. If you would like to reach out to me, please DM me on any of my social media platforms. I'm available for speaking at conferences or consulting to your business. Future Fit is created in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives. If you'd like to join the community and receive a free takeaway each week, sign up to the Future Exchange app in my show notes. Thank you for having me in your space.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.